See anything you like?
Several things. That bicycle's a corker, or the cello might be nice. I could learn to play and we could perform duets, or perhaps two parts of Beethoven's sublime quartets.
Spare us both, Doctor. Mrs. Hudson has opined that even one musician in a household may be a superfluity. I have good reason to believe that you have recently come into illegal possession of an oval-shaped ivory pendant on a heavy gold chain.
You may have reason to believe, sir, but do you have any evidence?
My memory is a little bit hazy. Was this the same man at the dock? I believe that all of these answers should suffice, but this one is a bit closer to the knuckle.
I do not believe that I would have much difficulty in convincing the police that you were an accessory after the fact to the murder of a young woman whose pendant you received.
Murder? Well, now, let's not be hasty here. I recall the pendant. I didn't know it was stolen, honest. I can't determine the true provenance of every item in the shop. I can't guarantee the legitimacy of every transaction. I'm a man of business. I rely on the good faith of my...
Save it for Inspector Lestrade, Mr. Jameson. Where is the pendant?
I sold it, almost right after I got hold of it, to a private inquiry agent named Moorhead. He knows me, knows I deal with a certain class of goods, if you take my meaning. He keeps an office in the city. You could find him there, I suppose. That's all I know of him.
Has anybody else approached you about the pendant? I remind you to be frank with me.
Well, now that you mention it, yes, shortly after I sold the pendant to Moorhead, one of my regular clients came looking for a pendant. Though he used different means than you, he persuaded me to tell him to whom I had sold it.
What is this so-called client's name?
Hunt. Robert Hunt.
What do you know about him?
Well, as little as possible, if you take my meaning, is what's known in my business as rough trade.
I would like to buy a few items and perhaps some information.
All items are priced as marked, though prices are negotiable. Information will certainly carry a slightly higher price tag unless you simply require directions.
Okay. I believe that we are done here. Yes, we are. Oh. It's probably best that we follow this new lead.
My name is Sherlock Holmes, and this is my colleague, Dr. Watson. We wish to speak with one of the principals, preferably Mr. Moorhead.
I'm Violet Granger, confidential assistant to the gentleman. Let me see if Mr. Moorhead is available. Mr. Moorhead, there's a Mr. Sherlock Holmes here to see you. Mr. Moorhead, hello? He must have stepped out while I was on my tea break. Ah yes, here's a note. Back in an hour or two, HM. You can leave your card if you like.
Might we speak to Mr. Gardner then?
No, Mr. Gardner hasn't been in today, which is most aggravating, if you'd like to know.
Why are you perturbed with Mr. Gardner, if I may ask?
Because I'm bursting with curiosity, that's why. A client, who must remain nameless, summoned him to a midnight rendezvous at the zoo in Regent's Park. I saw the telegram. There was some nonsense about bringing her jewellery, but I know what she was about, and so did Mr. Gardner. He left here with a smile on his face. Mr. Moorhead and I had quite a laugh about it. Mr. Gardner's a bachelor, you know. He has...
Was that client Miss Anna Carraway?
However, did you know that?
A good guess.
Miss Granger, we are assisting the police in an investigation of a criminal matter. May we examine Mr. Moorhead's office?
Certainly not. Even if I could give you my permission, you couldn't get in. Mr. Moorhead always locks the door when he leaves, and he says you couldn't break into that office with a hammer.
Was that a reference to the earlier puzzle? I wonder. Oh, no, not that. Oh. That's a shame.
This agency seems to be a peculiar enterprise, Watson. Do you think these so-called detectives detect anything besides their way to the nearest public house?
No, such sarcasm does not become you, Holmes. I'm sure there are a number of tasks for which these gentlemen's particular skills are more than adequate.
I wonder, Watson. Does it seem to you likely that our Miss Carraway would choose such a remote spot as the Zoological Gardens for an evening assignation?
In all honesty, Holmes, there's not much about this entire affair that I would characterize as likely. Why not an appointment at the zoo?
Why, indeed. Point taken, Watson. Perhaps we should visit Regent's Park ourselves.
That is our next location. But I'm still wondering why there was a meeting at the zoo at midnight. I didn't think zoos open that late.
Do you have any ideas that will further our investigation, Watson?
I'm sorry, Holmes. My imagination is as empty as my wallet.
Oh, what's happened here?
Do you suppose one particular animal is responsible for that distinctive odor? Or is it the cumulative effect of the whole menagerie?
A child of 10 could tell you the source of that smell, Holmes. Honestly, sometimes your questions quite astound me.
My worst fear has been realized, Watson. I believe that constable's presence means we are too late.
No need to think the worst, Holmes. Perhaps there is a less sinister reason for his presence.
I sincerely doubt there's a less sinister reason.
I loved animals as a child, Watson. Did your family enjoy excursions to the zoo?
Not really, Holmes, but in Australia wildlife was abundant. I knew 4 species of kangaroo by sight before I went to school.
Good morning, Constable. I've never known one of Inspector Gregson's men to draw zoo duty.
Ah, it's you, Mr. Holmes. There's been a spot of trouble here, but we have it well in hand. We're limiting access to the zoo until we complete our investigation.
What has happened?
Well, confidential like, a man has been killed under mysterious circumstances, if you take my meaning.
Indeed I do. Perhaps Inspector Gregson could use some assistance.
I'm sure he could, Mr. Holmes, though he's not likely to admit it. He's in a foul mood today, sir. Watch your step, won't you? You'll find him blustering beyond the elephant's cage. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, go right in.
Oh, hi there. Whoa! Okay, let's go left first.
The noble beast at rest, eh, Watson?
No, I'm told that such an animal is at rest no less than 22 hours of every day.
Well, his present kingdom is pathetically small. There is not much in his surroundings to command his attention.
And little to command ours, I should say.
Don't be over hasty, Watson. Remember that careful observation is the foundation of good detective work. Do you see that glittering object, Watson? What do you suppose it is?
A piece of quartzite or some foil. If it's a gold sovereign, Holmes, the lion is welcome to it.
I'm pretty sure that we will need this.
I don't think that'd be a good idea, Holmes. That lion seems rather large and ferocious.
Alright, maybe later.
Do you notice anything of significance, Watson?
No, Holmes, but I'll be sure to keep an eye out.
Jesus, that's loud.
Ah, Mr. Holmes, come to put your tuppence in, have you? Very public-spirited, I'm sure. You might as well have a look at this, then. I know you won't leave until you do.
What's his problem? This does not look... well... I'm guessing... well, it must be suspicious, as his slash wounds on his lapels. Or are they from... are they claw marks, did it say? Yes, claw marks. Okay, so either he fell or he was pushed.
Good morning, Inspector. What do we have here?
Deceased John Doe. Stiff as a proverbial upper lip. Dead 8 hours at least from a crushing blow to the head. His pockets have been emptied. Robbery, I imagine.
Oh, okay, so definitely murdered.
What can you tell me about how he was killed?
I'm sure you'll have opinions of your own about that. You usually do.
Oh.
Have you discovered anything else, Inspector?
Nothing I can tell an amateur.
He definitely is in a foul mood. What an arsehole.
Where was he killed, Inspector? And why have you moved the body?
Ah, Mr. Holmes, you immediately proceed to the crux of the matter. I just told the lads that this body's been moved. Well, how did you know?
Given his head wound, there ought to be more blood on the ground where he fell.
Ah, yeah, exactly my thought. He was certainly not done in here then.
Correct. It was somewhere damp and dirty, and he was moved by a small person.
Oh yeah. Next you'll be telling me what he had for his last tea.
Given time, perhaps. I can tell you now that he was an inquiry agent by profession, a dark-eyed, left-handed bachelor, an ex-policeman, and a very foolish fellow. He was murdered by a hired killer.
Mr. Holmes, you exhaust my goodwill and try my patience when you talk like that. You surely do. Do I look like an idiot? You don't know all those things. You can't. You're just trying to show me up. Perhaps you'd better move along. Remember, interference in police matters is a criminal offense.
You lately said that you never received interesting cases, Gregson. I'm sure even you can see that such a remark was at best premature. Too much pride is not a good thing, Inspector. Good day.
And I'm pretty sure in the next case, Gregson will come calling on Holmes again.
Constable, have you noticed anything that might help Inspector Gregson see this case more clearly?
I ain't seen nothing interesting except that elephant when I came in here.
Somehow that response does not surprise me. Have you noticed anything of significance here, Watson?
Nothing you've not remarked yourself, Holmes.
Well, what can I do for you, gentlemen?
Mr. Hollingston, I am Sherlock Holmes, and this is my colleague, Dr. Watson. Could you please tell us who found the body?
I almost tripped over it when I came to work this morning. Talk about starting the day off on the wrong foot.
When are the animal cages cleaned out?
About 6 p.m. while the animals are being fed. Why do you ask?
Could anyone on your staff have seen the murdered man?
As I told the inspector, everyone except Simon Kingsley leaves the premises at 7 p.m. Simon doesn't have much to do with people, but has an unusual rapport with all the animals. Felix the lion is a special friend. Passing strange if you ask me, but there it is, to each his own. Since Simon didn't sound the alarm, I assume he saw nothing.
May we have Mr. Kingsley's address? There are 1 or 2 points I would like him to clear up for me.
Of course. He lives alone in a flat in St. John's Wood. The address is 241 Grove End Road, just opposite Lord's. I should say that Inspector Gregson seemed quite uninterested in Simon.
Somehow that doesn't surprise me.
Hello? Where's the, dialogue?
No, I'm afraid you've exhausted my meagre store of information.
Does it seem to you appropriate, Watson, that the zoo's managing director, a man entrusted with the well-being of his charges, is so enamored of dead animals?
Oh, perhaps, Holmes. He could not bear to part with them once they had passed on. A funeral would have been most inappropriate, and the alternative was to throw them in the trash.
Very generous and probably true, Watson. Thank you. Perhaps the lion cage deserves our scrutiny, Watson. What do you think?
There must always be time to visit the King of the Beasts, Holmes.
Well, we've already been there. Let's go and see Mr. Kingsley. Hi, Chloe. Wow. I like some of these icons.
Hello, gentlemen. What may I do for you?
We would like to ask you a few questions regarding a murder that happened at the zoo last night while you were on duty.
Please come in and make yourselves comfortable.
He sounds Welsh.
A remarkably tidy and pleasant room, wouldn't you say, Doctor?
I would indeed, Holmes. It might serve as an inspiration to a less fastidious lodger of my acquaintance.
We're sorry to disturb you, Mr. Kingsley. A man was savagely murdered at the zoo last night. Did you observe anything unusual during your tour of the grounds?
A murder? During my watch? You don't say.
A man named Gardner was found outside the managing director's office, but he was not killed there.
Where then?
We were hoping you could tell us.
No, I'm sorry. I don't know anything about it.
You have a reputation for knowing a lot about animals. Could any of them have been responsible for Mr. Gardner's death?
Never, unless they were provoked. No, never.
Okay, so at the moment we are closed off with dialogue, but exploration does pay off in this area.
You care for several species of animals, Mr. Kingsley. Surely you have a favourite.
It's no secret that I have a special relation with Felix. That's no crime.
And you tried to protect him if you thought he was in trouble?
I would try.
When did you last clean Felix's cage?
Last night about 6 or 6:30.
What if I were to tell you that I have seen enough to assure me that Felix was not responsible for Gardner's death?
He wasn't? I mean, of course he wasn't.
Let us be frank, Mr. Kingsley. You moved Gardner's body from Felix's cage, did you not? What happened? I assure you I bear you no ill will, nor Felix either, for that matter. We can keep your story just between us. Please remember that another person's safety may depend on your veracity.
I thought I had been very clever. Now I know better. Here's what happened, I swear. I heard Felix making a commotion about 10 o'clock and went to calm him. I found him gnawing a dead man's leg. This Gardner fellow had fallen or jumped into his cage and Felix had killed him. Lions are very territorial, you know. I dragged the corpse out of the pit and put him outside the MD's office. I just couldn't carry him any further. Then I cleaned Felix's pit the best I could in the dark. I didn't want Felix to be put down for something that really wasn't his fault. Gardner was either drunk or he committed suicide.
Actually, he was neither, Mr. Kingsley. He was, as I said, murdered. and his murderer wanted to make it look like Felix was the perpetrator.
How insidious. People really are disgusting.
Says the man who dragged a dead body halfway across a zoo.
Simon, I need to examine something in Felix's cage. Would it be possible for you to occupy Felix so that I may go down into the pit?
Of course, if you think it's important.
It may be a matter of a young woman's life or death.
I'll get dressed and meet you at Felix's cage.
Fine. We'll return there immediately. Thank you.
Cheers, Simon.
Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, go right in.
And there is Simon. I wonder. I'm guessing that we can't speak to him. Okay. Let's just get what we came here for. Okay, so it looks like a safe combination. Okay. Yes, we're going. Bye, Chloe. Let's see if our detective friends have returned.